Today we're going to be talking about grey cards. So you may have seen grey cards in camera shops and online, and the prices range from £2 or £3 to £150, and you're going, what is the difference? It's just grey, it's the same shade of grey from here to there. Why am I spending so much money? Are the photography guys ripping me off again? Because that does happen. You know, you've seen those memory cards and those batteries for £50 when you can buy them on Amazon for £5. Why exactly would you buy a grey card, I hear you say? Very good question. Two reasons: exposure and white balance. Everything that I shoot on and film with is in the links below. And full disclosure, I will be getting a little bit of a kickback from Amazon if you do buy through there. So let's start off with the first one, and that is white balance. So as a quick overview, white balance can apply to photos and video, and essentially, without going too technical, it's adjusting the sensor inside your camera to remove any blue, yellow, or even green and magenta color casts out of your picture. Have you ever taken a photo on a roll of film, if you're back in the day, or you shoot analog photography, and you go, wow, this picture's really yellow? Or you're inside a room and you've got those strip lights above you, and you take a photo and it's gone all green. Now, how do we get a white balance which isn't too yellow, isn't too blue, isn't too green, and isn't too magenta? We use a grey card. The grey on this particular grey card is equal amounts of green, red and blue. If you set the custom white balance to this in your camera, you will get perfect white balance, I guarantee it to you. And if we bring that footage or photo into any of our editors and we show a RGB parade histogram, or we put the white balance checker onto it, we can see that it's not giving a color cast of any kind. I'm just going to stick the camera into the wrong white balance now, just to see if you can tell the difference, so bear with me. Definitely the wrong white balance. Let's go back. Whew. Okay, fine. Moving on. The second thing you can use a grey card for is exposure. Wow, I said exposure like really British. Exposure! Okay, so exposure relates to how bright or dark your image is, and this is an entirely subjective matter. You can have low-key pictures, you can have high-key pictures, you can have ones with no highlights, with crushed blacks, but to get to the middle, between too dark and too light, gives you the most flexibility in post-production. Now, not only is this card nice and grey, it's also exactly the right shade of white and black. This shade of grey is the exact centre of what camera sensors are based on. That may not make too much sense right now, but if we look back at classic photographers like Ansel Adams, they wrote books on this, on how film back then looked for a middle point between too dark and too light. It's called zone metering. Modern day sensors have the same similar kind of zone metering, where whatever it looks at, it's going to try and make a middle grey. What do I mean by middle grey? Well, it's not too dark, it's not too light. And it uses middle grey to average out any underexposed or overexposed pictures. Setting the exposure is almost as easy as setting the white balance. Before you start shooting, you aim the camera at the grey card, you adjust your ISO or your aperture or your shutter speed so that the exposure slider at the bottom of your screen is nice and centered. Once you've set your exposure, you are free to go and start shooting, happily knowing that your footage is going to be perfectly balanced. You can have the most latitude and the most flexibility in post-production of any footage you can do, and even that white balance is sorted as well. Setting both of these takes 20-30 seconds. You only realistically need to do it once when you are in a location, unless the weather is changing, for instance. If you go inside, yeah, you may have to do the white balance and exposure again, but you do get the hang of it pretty quickly, and it is a lifesaver to save that footage afterwards. Now, of course, you can use this on location as well. I went out with my mate Kyle to film something for Minnie with his absolute beefy little go-kart of a car, and we used his Sony camera and my gimbal and the grey card to very quickly set up exposure and white balance for perfect shooting at 11 o'clock at night in a car park with fluorescent lights. So John, I hear you say, why can't I just use a white card? Why can't I just use a white piece of paper that I get down the office? Good question, because this grey card has a white side as well. Now, when we think back to using the grey card for white balance, this is absolutely fine. This is a nice neutral colour. This is not going to have a bias of green, reds or blue, so you can do your white balance off this, but you can't do that exposure. If I was to set the camera to do an exposure based off this white, it'd be way too dark. But if you are in a pinch, a sneaky little hack is for you to grab some white paper, show it to the camera, at least you can get your white balance correct without needing to get your exposure. then you can just do your exposure by eye. There's no problem with that. In fact, it's better sometimes to learn how to do these techniques from memory, just in case you don't have a grey card in the future. So to wrap up, a grey card is an amazing piece of kit that solves two of your biggest problems when shooting or taking photos. The grey cards, as they range from £3 for these tiny little ones on a lanyard, all the way up to £150 for these colour checker passports, they all do slightly different things. The higher end ones are going to give you colours, so reds and greens and skin tones as well to balance from in post-production, whereas the little cheap grey cards on a lanyard are just good to get a spot metering or to hold really close to your camera. Obviously, the bigger the grey card is, the easier it is to take a photo of. Because you're going to need that grey card in the same light as your subject, you're going to need to be able to aim at something large. So having a big one like this lastolite one, you can give to someone a bit of a distance away, get them to hold it, zoom in a little bit, even move in a little bit, get that exposure, get that white balance, and then move on back. Those little £3 credit card sized grey cards, you're gonna have a much tougher job. But it does fit into your bag a lot easier, right? So if you've made it this far, I want to thank you so much, and I appreciate everyone who's stuck around right to the end. As I said before, the links are down below if you want to pick up any of the products, and I will see you again in a future video. Peace!